My sister had an affair with a man I'd loved for 10 years, and they ended up getting married. But the real punch in the gut? She had big news to share, and my parents decided to reveal it right in the middle of my wedding. Growing up, it was impossible not to notice that my younger sister was the golden child. From the moment she was born, it was like the spotlight shifted directly onto her. I was only 4 at the time, but even then, I could feel the atmosphere in our house change. It stopped being a home for both of us and turned into a stage for her one-woman show. My parents were her biggest fans from day one. Her nursery? It looked like something out of a designer catalog, state-of-the-art crib, plush blankets, and toys that probably cost more than all my birthday gifts combined. Meanwhile, my stuff was the budget-friendly kind, basic, practical, and usually pre-used. Not that I was deprived of what I needed, but there was no mistaking the gap between what she got and what I received. As the years went by, the difference only became more obvious. Take birthdays, for example. Hers were full-blown productions, decor themes, hired entertainers, and a guest list packed with family friends and our parents' colleagues. It was like a mini gala each year. Mine? A modest cake, maybe a few balloons, and a quiet evening with close relatives. I wasn't asking for a red carpet, but it would have been nice to feel a bit celebrated. School only widened the gap. She always had brand new outfits and the latest tech gadgets. I, on the other hand, trudged around with a fraying backpack and clothes that had clearly been passed down. At school, she was the bubbly social butterfly, while I was the quiet bookworm. Teachers doted on her for being outgoing and charming. My straight-A report cards? They got noticed only when it was time for parent-teacher conferences. Our parents invested in her interests like they were funding a future star. She wanted ballet? She got enrolled in the best dance academy around. I wanted to play soccer, but they waved it off, too rough, too risky. Everything had to be picture perfect for her. Holidays were more of the same. Christmas morning always looked like her personal wish list had exploded in the living room. Sure, I got gifts too, but they felt like items someone grabbed off a list out of obligation. For her, every present was thoughtfully picked, like they were trying to grant every dream. Emotionally, it was just as uneven. The tiniest thing she accomplished, landing a role in the school play or winning a class award, was met with fireworks and dinner outings. I eventually stopped getting excited about my own wins because I knew they'd barely register. It didn't feel like neglect exactly, but it certainly didn't feel like being seen either. And as we grew up, she learned to use her status like a weapon. She knew she could do no wrong in their eyes and leaned into it hard. Anytime we fought, it was always me who had to make peace. And if I ever dared to point out the imbalance, I was quickly shut down with, "She's younger, just let it go." So I looked for a corner of the world that was mine, something untouched by her spotlight. That's when I found writing. It gave me a space where I got to decide who mattered and how the story unfolded. My parents never really understood it, but because it wasn't something she could outshine, they mostly left me alone about it. Things really started to boil over when we hit our teen years. That's when the differences became impossible to ignore. She was always the center of attention. Every party, every gathering, she was the headliner. And I became more like a narrator in the background. We barely spoke anymore, despite sharing the same house. It felt less like living with a sister and more like coexisting with a stranger who just happened to share your last name. Growing up with someone who's treated like royalty isn't as glamorous as it sounds, especially when you're the one constantly cleaning up after the parade. Once we hit our teens, her entitled streak turned into full-on diva behavior. She didn't just act like the favorite, she ruled like it. She'd strut into any room like she owned the place. At home, that meant instant gratification. Want a new phone? Done. Need a later curfew? No problem. Meanwhile, I had to beg, bargain, and justify every little thing. And it wasn't just about material stuff. She demanded and got constant attention. Our parents hung on her every word like it was gospel. They'd laugh at her mediocre jokes like they were stand-up gold and couldn't stop bragging about her social life. You'd think she cured cancer the way they talked her up. And school? That was her kingdom. Her popularity kept growing, not just because she was fun, but because she mastered the art of image control. She threw these insane birthday bashes that had kids jockeying for invites like it was VIP access. One year, her party was so over the top, it was still being talked about months later. My own invite felt like an afterthought, only handed out so it wouldn't look weird for her sister to be missing. Her style was always a few steps ahead of the trend. She had the best clothes, latest phones, trendiest accessories. If I ever got something new, it was usually her cast-off, stuff she decided wasn't worth keeping. Even in how I dressed, I felt like a knockoff version of her. Most of my closet consisted of her second-hand clothes, which, ironically, were still nicer than anything I could afford brand new. Academics were just another place where her performance shined. She didn't just do well, she made sure everyone knew it. An A on her report card? That was a full-blown family event. I quietly maintained a top GPA, but it was expected, not applauded. Our parents were her personal cheerleaders. If she was in a school play, they showed up every night and dragged extended family along too, turning it into a Broadway premiere. If I was in that same play, the message was clear. Don't miss your sister's scene, she's got a major part. Family gatherings turned into her stage shows. She dominated conversations with exaggerated tales of her achievements, drawing laughs and admiration from relatives. Me? I just sat on the edge of the couch, offering supportive nods and polite chuckles. It was draining, constantly exhausting, really, but whenever I tried to talk about my own life, she'd swoop in with another attention-grabbing story and steal the spotlight like clockwork. But her entitlement wasn't just frustrating, it was downright damaging. She had a real talent for bending situations to benefit herself. I remember one time, we both had our eyes on this gorgeous dress for an upcoming family wedding. I spotted it first, no doubt about it, but once we got to the store, she threw such a dramatic tantrum about how it was the only thing that looked good on her that my parents buckled instantly. Just folded like a cheap chair. I ended up picking out something else, not terrible, but that wasn't the point. She wanted it, so she got it. End of story. And it wasn't just our parents who got played. She had this uncanny ability to manipulate her friends too, using them like pieces on a chessboard. Her inner circle wasn't so much a group of friends as it was a fan club. She was the queen, and everyone else existed to orbit around her. I once watched her at one of her ridiculous house parties casually stir up a fight between two of her closest friends over something laughably petty, just for the drama of it. Like it was some reality show for her entertainment. The worst part? Whenever conflict came up, and it often did, I was always the one expected to take the high road. Every time. She's your little sister. Try to understand her, they'd say. Or, she didn't mean it that way, you know how she is. Didn't matter what actually happened. The conclusion was always the same. She was right, and I was being too sensitive or too difficult. Living with her wasn't just frustrating. It was like trying to tiptoe through a minefield made of emotional traps. One misstep, one failure to fall in line with her narrative, and suddenly I was the villain in the story. By the time I hit senior year, I was juggling college applications, scholarship essays, and the constant chaos my sister stirred up just by existing. Meanwhile, she was peaking, hosting even bigger parties, growing her social circle, and making more outrageous demands that our parents happily indulged. They still looked at her like she hung the stars. At that point, I'd been with Ethan for a couple of years. He was my safe space, the one person who really understood what life in my house felt like. He'd seen the tantrums, the double standards, the way my parents bent over backward for her. Through it all, he stayed grounded, kind, and at least back then, I believed he was mine. Or so I thought. It all started unraveling in the most subtle way. Ethan and I had plans. We wanted to go to the same college, break away from the small-town mess, and start fresh together. We talked about it all the time, our majors, dorms, what city we'd end up in. But as senior year rolled on, Ethan started pulling away. He became more distracted, less enthusiastic when we talked about the future. I figured he was just stressed like I was. Finals, applications, nerves, it made sense at the time. I brought it up a couple of times, asked him if something was bothering him. He waved it off every time, told me not to worry. Everything's fine, he'd say. I believed him. Then came the night that shattered everything. It was another one of my sister's infamous weekend parties, loud music, people spilling out of every room, drinks flowing like water. I wasn't in the mood for any of it, but since it was at our house and Ethan was there, I decided to stick around and stay close to him. About halfway through the night, I realized I hadn't seen Ethan in a while. He wasn't by the bar set up in the backyard or near the pool where the louder crowd usually gathered. I figured maybe he went upstairs to use the bathroom or got pulled into some random conversation. So I went looking. I made my way upstairs and past my sister's room. I heard voices. Nothing out of the ordinary at first, until I caught Ethan's laugh. That specific laugh that used to make me melt. Hearing it coming from behind her door made my stomach twist. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe they were just chatting. Maybe there were others in there. Maybe it was harmless. I knocked. Silence. I knocked again, louder this time. The talking stopped. The door cracked open, and there she was, my sister. She looked smug. Not surprised. Just annoyed that I had interrupted whatever was going on. And behind her stood Ethan, looking caught and ashamed, like a kid who got caught cheating on a test. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to sound calm, but my heart was pounding. "Relax, we were just talking," she said casually, brushing it off. "Yeah, just catching up," Ethan added, eyes darting anywhere but mine. I pushed the door open further and took in the scene. Her lipstick was smeared on his shirt. His jacket was draped over the back of her chair. The tension in the room was suffocating. It hit me like a freight train. No excuses, no denial could explain it away. I felt like the ground had vanished beneath me. The confrontation that followed was chaos. There was yelling, tears, anger. Accusations flew back and forth. My sister, ever the actress, played the poor misunderstood girl who didn't mean for this to happen. Ethan stumbled over apologies, trying to explain what couldn't be explained. That night, I ended things with Ethan for good. Not just because he cheated, but because he chose her. My sister. She crossed a line I couldn't forgive. And honestly, I don't think she ever wanted forgiveness. I think she wanted the thrill, the validation, maybe just the satisfaction of proving she could take anything that was mine. My parents were useless in the aftermath. They tried to smooth things over like this was just a little family spat. "She's your sister," they kept saying. "You need to talk it through. Family is forever." But I couldn't accept that. Not this time. Not after what she did. In the weeks that followed, everything unraveled. It was like my life had been set up like dominoes, and that party, the betrayal, was the finger that tipped the first one over. I was numb, barely going through the motions. It felt like I was watching my own life from the outside. I couldn't look at her. Couldn't stand being in the same room. And she acted like none of it mattered. Business as usual. Still their pride and joy. Still untouchable. I shut down. Locked myself in my room whenever I was home. Spent most of my time crashing at friends' places. My parents didn't know what to do, so they tried offering solutions. Family therapy was one. As if some awkward conversation in a counselor's office could fix years of imbalance and this one ultimate betrayal. But seriously, how was therapy supposed to fix this? How could it possibly erase the image burned into my memory of my boyfriend and my sister in her room, behind that door? How could I ever sit in some office, calmly talking about my feelings while they sat there pretending to be misunderstood victims? Just the thought of it made me sick. I flat out refused. I told my parents clearly, with no room for argument, that there was no way I was going to play house and pretend like we were some happy, healing family. This wasn't a simple mix-up. It wasn't a spat or a disagreement. This was betrayal in its purest form. And I wasn't about to pretend otherwise. After I snapped at them, my parents finally backed off. Maybe they finally got a glimpse of how deep the wound really went. Or maybe they just decided to focus on my sister, again like they always did. She, of course, played her part to perfection. The misunderstood baby of the family. The poor thing caught in a whirlwind of drama, not of her own making. I couldn't wait to leave. College became my escape plan. I was counting down the days like a prisoner scratching tally marks on a cell wall. So when that acceptance letter came in the mail, I felt like I could breathe again. I'd gotten into a college a few states away, far enough that surprise visits would be a logistical nightmare. The day I packed up my life and left that house was bittersweet. Sure, I was saying goodbye to everything familiar. But I was also closing the door on a chapter filled with pain. My mom cried at the doorway. My dad gave me one of those awkward half-hugs he specialized in. And my sister? She barely looked up. Gave me this lukewarm, good luck, like she couldn't figure out how to insert herself into the moment. College felt like a fresh breath after years of suffocation. I dove headfirst into my classes and built friendships with people who didn't know a thing about my family. For the first time in forever, I got to just be me. Not the sister of the girl who stole my boyfriend. Not the quiet one. Not the forgotten daughter. But the past doesn't just vanish, does it? The wounds didn't close overnight. I found it hard to trust people. I'd flinch at kindness, wondering if there was something hidden behind it. I kept everyone at arm's length, waiting for the shoe to drop, waiting for the betrayal that always seemed to come. Dating was even harder. I went out with a few guys, but nothing serious ever stuck. I couldn't let myself be vulnerable again, not like I was with Ethan. The thought of someone else holding that kind of power over me was terrifying. Back home, I kept in touch with my parents, but barely. A few texts here, a couple of short phone calls. They always asked when I'd be coming home for holidays, and I always had an excuse. Finals, group projects, a friend's trip, whatever I could say to avoid that house. Time passed. The sting dulled a little. And then, through my mom's casual updates, I found out my sister had married Ethan. Yep, they tied the knot. They even had the audacity to invite me to the wedding. I didn't go, of course. That bridge had burned a long time ago. As far as I was concerned, that chapter was finished. She wasn't my sister anymore. She was just someone I used to know. Graduation came, and my parents showed up. It was awkward, lots of forced smiles and stiff conversation. My sister didn't come. Apparently, she had other obligations. Honestly, that suited me just fine. After graduation, I moved even farther away. Took a job across the country, new city, new life. No one knew my backstory, and that was exactly how I wanted it. I carved out something for myself, something real. I found work I loved, built a circle of friends, and eventually, I met someone. He was patient, kind, and when I finally opened up about my past, he didn't flinch. He just listened, held my hand, told me I wasn't crazy for being guarded. And slowly, painfully, I began to trust again. I rebuilt. It wasn't perfect. My relationship with my family never fully healed. I kept in touch with my parents, but our conversations stayed on the surface. No deep dives. No peeling back the layers. And my sister? She became a ghost in my life. A name, not a person. I'd see a photo now and then, hear a story here or there, but I felt nothing. Sometimes I wondered if I was being too harsh, if cutting her out completely had been extreme. But then I'd remember the look on her face when she opened that door. The smugness. The total lack of remorse. And I'd remember how broken I felt afterward. No. Cutting ties wasn't cruelty, it was survival. Declaring her dead to me wasn't about revenge. It was about self-preservation. It was the only way I could truly move forward. And I did. Slowly but surely, I built a life that belonged to me, and no one else. Getting married should have been the happiest time of my life. And for the most part, it was. Planning the wedding was like building a dream piece by piece, flowers, venue, dress, the whole deal. But that shadow from the past? My sister? It still hovered. Daniel, my fiancé, knew everything. He knew what happened, every painful detail. And he stood by me through it all. When I told him I wasn't inviting her, he didn't flinch. Didn't try to change my mind. Just nodded and said, good. As the big day crept closer, my excitement mixed with nerves. I wanted to start this new chapter, but I also dreaded the inevitable family tension. My parents had accepted most of my choices, but when it came to my sister, they just couldn't let it go. They kept bringing her up, asking me to reconsider for the family's sake. But I wouldn't budge. Not this time. Not on my wedding day. That morning, everything felt like a fairy tale. The garden venue was bursting with spring flowers, the scent of roses and jasmine swirling through the air. Lights twinkled above us, music hummed in the background. It was perfect. Friends and family filled the space, laughter bubbling through the air. I was in the bridal suite with my bridesmaids, doing the final touches, when there was a knock at the door. It was my mom. She stepped in, looking unsure, her fingers nervously clutching her clutch bag. Sweetheart, I really wish you'd change your mind about your sister, she said softly. It would mean so much to have her here. I looked in the mirror at my own eyes staring back. Mom, I said, calmly but firmly, we've talked about this. She made her choices. I made mine. Today isn't about her. It's about me and Daniel. She opened her mouth like she had more to say, but stopped. Gave me a tight little nod and walked out. The ceremony was everything I'd dreamed of. Daniel looked incredible, and when I walked down that aisle, all I could see was him. We said our vows through misty eyes, and when the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, it felt like something inside me finally let go. I was married. I was happy. And it was ours. But then came the reception. We'd just finished our first dance and had taken our seats for dinner when my dad stood up with a microphone. He said he wanted to say a few words. I smiled, expecting some heartfelt speech about love, commitment, and how proud he was. Instead, he turned to the guests and said, "I know we're all thrilled for my daughter and Daniel, but I'd like to take a moment to talk about someone who couldn't be here tonight." And just like that, the past came crashing back in. The moment my dad started speaking into that mic, I felt my stomach drop. I could already tell this wasn't going to be about me and Daniel. He started talking about my sister, her recent struggles, how she'd wanted to be there but couldn't. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get worse, he mentioned she had recently lost a baby and asked everyone to keep her in their thoughts. My skin flushed hot with embarrassment and anger. It was like I was invisible again, like I was 15 and watching them comfort her over something she caused. A ripple moved through the crowd, soft gasps, whispers, confused glances, and slowly, eyes turned to me. I stood up abruptly, the scrape of my chair echoing like a slap. "Dad, please," I said, trying to stay composed. "Today is about me and Daniel. Let's keep it that way." He looked surprised, almost like he couldn't understand why I'd interrupt his speech. But to his credit, he didn't argue. He just handed the mic back to the DJ and sat down. The energy in the room shifted. You could feel it, like a storm had brushed past but hadn't fully cleared. I tried to shake it off, to focus on the people who came to celebrate, on the joy that was still present, but it stuck with me. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table, and that simple gesture kept me anchored. Just knowing he was there, solid and unwavering, helped me breathe through the tension. Later, my best friend got up to give her toast. She didn't name names or call anything out directly, but her words hit home. She talked about loyalty and resilience and how love sometimes means choosing yourself first. I laughed. I cried. And for a moment, the sting of earlier faded. The day really was beautiful, maybe not perfect, but still one of the happiest of my life. But my dad's little speech served as a reminder of something I already knew in my bones. My sister had always had the power to disrupt my peace. Even from afar, even in her absence, she knew how to send waves through my world. As Daniel and I drove away that night, me bundled up in my wedding dress, half smiling, half exhausted, I felt a weird mix of joy and grief. I had just married the man I loved. But somehow, even on this sacred day, the ghosts of my past still found a way to sneak in. That's when it really hit me. No matter how far I ran, no matter how much I built on my own, those family ties, they didn't vanish. They just stretched. But now, with Daniel beside me, I felt a little braver. A little steadier. Together, we'd face the mess, navigate the chaos, and protect what we were building, a life with peace, love, and none of the old noise. Still, the wedding might have ended, but that moment my dad hijacked the spotlight stayed with me like a splinter. I told myself once we got back from our honeymoon, things would calm down, that the drama would quiet itself and let us breathe. But that's the thing about my family. The drama never really goes away. It just waits for the next opportunity to rear its head. The phone calls started not long after we returned. First, it was my mom. Her voice was tight, laced with a blend of concern and criticism. She told me how hurt my dad was by how I handled the speech situation. He was just trying to bring the family together, she said, painting him like some poor man stuck in the middle. I bit my tongue. I didn't bother pointing out that when I was the one hurting, nobody rallied to protect my peace. Then my aunt called, one of the few relatives who ever tried to play the neutral peacekeeper. She was gentler, softer in her approach. Said maybe it was time to mend things, to put the past behind us. Life's short, she said. You don't want to carry that anger forever. But how do you put the past behind you when it keeps crashing into your present? One evening, Daniel and I were cooking dinner together. I was chopping vegetables when he handed me the phone, brows furrowed. "It's your dad," he said. I took a deep breath and answered. "Your mother, and I think it's time we all had a talk," Dad said. His voice carried that familiar tone, the one that always made me feel like a kid getting a lecture. I leaned against the counter. "Talk about what, Dad?" About how you used my wedding to make it about her. He sighed. Not frustrated, just tired. It's not just about that. It's about the rift in this family. It's about your sister. It's about all of us. I felt something in me shut down. That old ache in my chest? It flared up again, dragging years of buried frustration to the surface. What is there to say? I asked. She made her choices. I made mine. We're still your family. We. That's when I cut him off. Yeah? And where was this family when I was hurting? When I was screaming on the inside and no one cared to ask why? Where was all this concern then? There was silence. Not the kind that begs for answers, but the kind that finally admits there aren't any. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer. Smaller. We just want to fix this. Maybe it can't be fixed, I replied, and I surprised even myself with how certain I sounded. We ended the call shortly after, but his words lingered long after I set the phone down. I stood there in the kitchen, surrounded by the smell of garlic and the hum of the stove, but all I could hear was that conversation replaying in my mind. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of opinions. Everyone in the family suddenly had something to say. Some offered advice. Some passed judgment. Most didn't really listen. It was all noise. And beneath it, I just felt tired. Then came the real confrontation. A few months later, we were invited to my uncle's birthday party. I didn't want to go. But Daniel, ever the optimist, nudged me gently. Maybe this is the chance to get some closure, he said. You don't have to forgive anyone, you just have to show up for yourself. So we went. The party was in full swing when we arrived. Laughter filled the backyard, kids ran between tables, and the smell of grilled food hung in the air. I pasted on a smile and tried to blend in, just another guest trying to be civil. And then I saw her, my sister, across the yard, laughing like she didn't have a care in the world. Something inside me froze. It was like all those wounds I thought had scabbed over suddenly cracked open again. I was about to turn and leave when she spotted me. And just like that, she started walking over. Each step she took made my pulse quicken. She walked like this wasn't a big deal. Like it hadn't been years of silence and betrayal. Hey, she said. Just that. Like we were casual acquaintances catching up. Hi, I replied, my voice cool, controlled. She paused, like she was testing the waters. Then she said, I know things have been bad between us, but I'm hoping we can start to move past it. I looked her dead in the eye, and in that moment, I didn't just see her. I saw everything. The betrayal. The lies. The spotlight that was always hers. The way she made me feel small. Move past it. I asked. You act like what you did was just a misstep. Like it was some small thing that can be smoothed over. She flinched. But then her face hardened into that old expression I knew too well, defiance hiding behind fake remorse. I made a mistake. I know that. But aren't families supposed to forgive? Forgiveness doesn't erase consequences, I said, my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. You didn't just make a mistake. You made a choice. And that choice cost you me. The conversation escalated quickly. Old wounds spilled out like broken glass on the pavement. Our voices rose. Heads turned. A half-circle of relatives gathered around us like it was some live drama they couldn't look away from. But I didn't care. Not anymore. It felt like we were performing for a live studio audience, relatives gathered like spectators, silently waiting to see how the next scene in the family soap opera would play out. That's when I hit my limit. This isn't the time or place, I said, cutting through the noise. And honestly, I don't think there's ever going to be a right time or place for us to fix this. Then I turned around and walked away, left her standing there in the middle of that half-circle of gawking relatives, eyes wide and mouths whispering. Daniel was by my side in a heartbeat, his hand at the small of my back, grounding me like always. The next day was unnervingly quiet. No calls. No texts. It was like the whole family had hit pause, waiting to see what my next move would be. Even Daniel, usually the light-hearted one, kept glancing at me like he wasn't sure whether to crack a joke or just hold me. Then the calls started trickling in. The first one came from my aunt. Good ol', Aunt Marie, the designated peacemaker. Her voice was soft, almost trembling. You know your parents are just devastated, she said gently. But I stopped her before she could launch into the usual routine. Aunt Marie, I love you, I said, but I can't do this right now. I just need some space. She didn't fight me on it. She understood. She always had. Then my mom called. Her tone? Very different. It was sharp. Clipped. How could you embarrass us like that? In front of the whole family, she demanded. I took a deep breath. Mom, this isn't about you. Or Dad. This is about me, my life. And the decisions I'm making to take care of myself. Oh, of course. It's always about you, isn't it? She snapped before slamming the call shut. Her words lingered longer than I wanted them to. It didn't matter how many years passed, my mother still knew how to find the softest spots and dig her claws in. The days turned into weeks and the fallout grew wider. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly had opinions, some sympathetic, others not so much. People I thought would always be in my corner were suddenly on the fence. But the biggest shift was between me and my parents. They were stuck, caught between two daughters. One they'd always spoiled, and one they didn't know how to handle without stepping on landmines. Every conversation was stiff, awkward. We danced around topics like they were fire. And my sister? Her name didn't come up. Ever. It was like we'd all silently agreed she didn't exist. But silence doesn't heal wounds. It just numbs them for a while. One night, sitting on the porch with Daniel, watching the sun dip behind the trees, he gently said, maybe we need a fresh start. New city. New faces. Just peace. I let the idea hang in the air. It was tempting, just pack up, start clean. But as I sat there, wrapped in his arm and my thoughts, I realized something. Running wouldn't fix the cracks. I didn't want to escape. I wanted to build. So we stayed. I threw myself into work, started writing again. This time not just for myself, but for others. I launched a blog, started sharing my story, connecting with people who knew the pain of being betrayed by the ones closest to them. The response blew me away. Suddenly, I wasn't alone. Daniel and I worked hard on us too. We went to couples therapy not because we were broken, but because we wanted to stay whole. We learned to communicate better, to listen without jumping to defense, to make space for each other even on the hardest days. We found small joys again, coffee on the porch, weekend hikes, slow dancing in the kitchen. And slowly, the jagged edges of the past softened. Some family members quietly drifted away. Others showed up stronger than ever. That support, it meant more than they'll ever know. Holidays were tough, though. That first Christmas, I skipped the family gathering completely. Instead, I volunteered at a local shelter. It felt strange at first, serving food to strangers while my own family sat around a tree pretending nothing was broken. But it also felt good. Empowering. Like I was choosing peace on purpose. As for my parents, things eventually found a new rhythm. We learned how to talk without ripping old wounds open. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. We focused on the present, on what little good we could still share. And my sister? We didn't speak for years. It was a silence that said everything words never could. I heard about her through updates from others, her kids, her house, her latest vacation. It felt surreal, learning about someone who had once been my built-in best friend, like she was just some stranger in the neighborhood. In the end, that confrontation, messy, raw, uncomfortable as it was, became a turning point. It forced me to choose myself. And in doing so, I learned a lot. I learned that strength doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes, it's in walking away. I learned that family isn't just who you're born to. It's who stands beside you when your world shakes. And I learned that healing isn't a straight road. It loops and twists and sometimes makes you retrace painful steps. But you keep going. The mess didn't define me. The betrayal didn't break me. If anything, they led me right here to a life where I no longer play a background role in someone else's drama. This is my story now. And I'm finally living it on my own terms,